"Wait outside," the flight attendant snapped. "You don't belong here. I'm calling security." That's how it started. 7 words, 1 glance, 0 doubt in her voice. And just like that, Amaya Lennox, CEO of a billion-dollar aviation tech company, was standing in the rain outside a terminal she helped design. What would you have done in her place? Kept quiet, or made the skies bend to your name? Tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever been judged by how you look. Dallas-Fort Worth Elite Terminal wasn't just high-end. It was engineered to feel untouchable. From the gleaming glass walls to the ambient lighting and hushed tones, it gave the illusion that the air itself cost money to breathe. That illusion didn't rattle Amaya. She'd walked through better. She arrived alone, no entourage, no flashing credentials. Just a trench coat draped over her shoulders and a soft leather carry-on. Her presence didn't announce wealth. It whispered power, controlled, refined, and dangerously easy to underestimate. And that's exactly what Bethany did. The uniformed attendant stepped into her path with rehearsed stiffness. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, her eyes scanning Amaya from head to toe. "This lounge is for premium clients only." Amaya tilted her head, not out of confusion, but to give Bethany a chance to correct her tone. She didn't. Instead, Bethany's voice sharpened, rising just enough for others nearby to hear. "I'll have to ask you to wait outside until we verify your details. This is not a public terminal." Amaya blinked slowly. Her boarding credentials were in hand, clearly marked with a VIP access code. She held them out. Bethany didn't even glance. "I've seen enough fakes to know how this goes." From across the lounge, a middle-aged white man in golf attire strolled in. No ID check, no questions. Bethany greeted him like a frequent guest. "Welcome back, Mr. Dunning. Straight through to Gate 3. Amaya was still standing there, unwelcomed, unspoken to. The difference? Skin. And the assumption that hers meant less. She said nothing, just stepped back calmly into the hallway. The rain had started, not loud, not aggressive, just persistent, enough to slick the floor and cling to her coat. She moved to stand beneath the overhang near the sliding glass doors. Still, composed. Inside, people kept walking past her like she was invisible. A few glanced her way, then away faster. None stopped. A young employee, Haley, her name tag read, watched from the desk. Her eyes flicked between Bethany and Amaya. You could see it in her face. She knew. She knew what was happening wasn't okay, but knowing and acting aren't always the same. Bethany returned after 10 minutes, this time with David, the terminal's floor supervisor. David had the kind of smile that only stretched when he thought he was right. "Ma'am," he began, "we're not finding your name in the manifest. You'll need to exit the terminal until we sort this out." "I'm a scheduled passenger," Amaya replied, voice calm. She handed over her boarding pass and federal ID. David flipped through them with exaggerated care. "These could have been printed at home." Amaya let the silence do its work. David chuckled. "We're a private terminal, ma'am. We deal with Fortune 500 execs, high-level officials, serious people with serious money. You don't quite fit that profile." That word, profile, sat in the air like poison. Amaya could have ended it right there, revealed who she was, named the board members who reported to her, quoted the line of code she personally wrote for the terminal's operations system. She didn't. Instead, she stepped back once more, now fully outside the automatic doors. Her coat was soaked. Water dripped from her curls. She didn't flinch. Not yet. Not until they showed her who they really were. 20 more minutes passed. 3 more passengers were welcomed in. None of them questioned. All white. All male. Haley watched, her face pale, hands fidgeting at her side. She looked like she might speak. But Bethany was nearby, and fear wins over fairness most of the time. Then came the final insult. Bethany leaned out of the door and sneered, "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but this jet isn't for influencers or social climbers. Maybe try JetBlue." She laughed. David chuckled behind her, and that was the moment the smile on Amaya's face changed. It wasn't polite anymore. It wasn't strained. It was the kind of smile people call dangerous. The kind of smile that means you've already lost, and you just don't know it yet. Amaya reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. She opened a secure encrypted channel, tapped one button, and spoke. "Stand by for interlock hold protocol. Confirm on my voice." On the other end of the country, in a subterranean control hub buried beneath SkyeGrid HQ, a light flickered. A live grid map spanning 23 federal airports turned yellow. Not red, not yet, but yellow meant warning. Yellow meant the skies were listening, and if necessary, the skies would answer to her. Amaya didn't look like power. That was her advantage. Because when you look like just another woman in the rain, no one sees you coming. They only feel the tremors after. Most people had never heard of Amaya Lennox, and that was exactly how she wanted it. You wouldn't find her on social media. No Twitter threads about leadership, no LinkedIn posts celebrating acquisitions, no glossy magazine interviews. You'd be hard-pressed to even find a recent photo. She was what the media called low visibility, high leverage. But in rooms that mattered, war rooms, boardrooms, operation centers, her name meant something. In some places, her name meant everything. She wasn't just the CEO of SkyeGrid Technologies. She was its architect. 12 years earlier, Amaya had been a systems engineer at a defense contractor in Seattle. Young, brilliant, and the only black woman in every room she entered. The higher she climbed, the more resistance she met. People praised her ideas in private, then repackaged them under someone else's name in public. She learned to play the long game. She left that job at 29, burned out, but burning with something bigger. 2 years later, she launched SkyeGrid, an ambitious aviation infrastructure company designed to do what no federal system had managed to do since the 1980s: modernize and synchronize real-time air traffic data across multiple hubs. She wasn't just building software. She was building a nervous system for the skies. Today, SkyeGrid powered flight routing, signal processing, and gate synchronization at 23 of the busiest airports in the country, including JFK, LAX, Atlanta, and yes, Dallas-Fort Worth. Her protocols moved millions of passengers a day without anyone knowing her name. That invisibility was her shield. But it also came at a cost. Amaya's home sat high above Seattle in the Queen Anne neighborhood, a minimalist glass and steel residence with sweeping views of the Puget Sound. It wasn't showy. No oversized art or glitzy furniture. Everything in her life served a function, not a flex. Her morning started at 5 a.m. sharp, with a silent alarm on her wrist, followed by black coffee, no sugar. Her phone was always in airplane mode for the first hour. She guarded her focus like currency. Her 18-year-old son, Jordan, was the only exception to every rule. They weren't flashy in how they loved each other. No over-the-top Instagram birthday messages. No mother-son TikToks. But there was a deep rhythm to their bond, built over years of late-night ramen, morning drop-offs, and shared playlists in the car. Jordan was graduating from Columbia in 3 days. That's why Amaya had boarded that jet in Dallas. That's why this flight mattered more than most. She'd missed enough milestones, science fairs, soccer games, even a few birthdays, because of red eyes and board meetings and system upgrades that couldn't wait. This time, she wasn't going to be late. The irony, of course, was that the very system delaying her flight now was her own. SkyeGrid's Interlink Authority gave her backdoor access to routing logic and gate assignments. She designed it that way, not to manipulate, but to monitor. Her position as final ethics approver gave her override powers no one else held. It was a privilege and a responsibility she never abused. Until today. Amaya still remembered the moment she'd been offered that role. 2 years ago, in a secure FAA meeting buried under the Department of Transportation's headquarters in D.C. She had flown in under a code name, met behind a triple-locked door, and signed a 15-year classified agreement. They didn't want a government bureaucrat writing the new rules of air traffic. They wanted someone smarter, faster, uncompromising. They wanted her, and she delivered. Under her framework, flight delays dropped by 18%, mid-air reroutes by 22%. Emergency response times down by nearly half. She had earned the nickname, the woman who tamed the sky, though she hated that phrase. She didn't tame anything. She just listened to patterns others ignored. But now, standing outside that glass terminal in Dallas, cold, wet, and disregarded, she realized something. She hadn't built SkyeGrid for people like Bethany. She'd built it to protect passengers from systems that treated them like problems instead of people. And somehow, her own infrastructure had become part of the problem. 25 feet away, Bethany was laughing with a group of white male passengers. The contrast stung. Their casual entitlement, her soaked coat. David, the terminal supervisor, walked past again. He didn't even glance her way this time. Haley did. The younger employee looked like she wanted to say something. Her fingers fidgeted at her waist. Her mouth opened, then closed. Amaya didn't blame her. It's hard to speak up when you're still proving you belong. It's even harder when no one around you would back you up. She had been Haley once. She remembered what it felt like to stay silent, and the moment she swore never to do it again. She tapped her phone again. Protocol hold status. Armed confirm voice authorization to proceed. Not yet. Let them go further. Let them write the last page of their own mistake. She had learned long ago. The best justice is self-inflicted. Her mind drifted back to a conversation with Jordan years ago. He was 12, upset after a teacher had mistaken him for a student from another school, one with a disciplinary record. "Why'd she think I was someone else?" he'd asked. "I wasn't even wearing the same colors." Amaya had crouched down to meet his eyes. "Because some people don't look at you," she said. "They look through you. And when they don't see what they expect, they fill in the blank with fear." He nodded, lips tight, fists clenched. "That's not fair." "No," she had said quietly. "But it's predictable, and that gives you power." She never taught him to fight fire with fire. She taught him to let the flames reveal who's really holding the match. Back at the terminal, Haley finally stepped forward. "Just a little." "Ma'am," she said softly. I'm really sorry about all this." Amaya didn't smile, but her voice was gentle. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Haley." "You're new here?" "Yes, 2 months." "Then here's the most important thing you'll learn," Amaya said, eyes still locked on the terminal entrance. "Pay attention to how people treat strangers. That's where the truth lives." Haley nodded. A long pause passed. Then Amaya added, "And don't be afraid to remember this moment. You'll need it one day." The clouds above rumbled. Inside, David was now reviewing passenger lists, probably looking for any trace of Amaya Lennox. But she never flew under that name. Her manifest ID for security purposes simply read, A. Lennox, FAA Protocol Access, Confidential. Only 4 people in the country had clearance to see what that meant. David wasn't one of them. Neither was Bethany. But they were about to learn. The skies were about to teach them. The rain was heavier now. Thick, wind-swept drops came down sideways across the terminal's polished windows, distorting the view of the tarmac beyond. But even through the blur, Amaya could see it. Her jet. A sleek, silver Gulfstream G700. 12-seat configuration. Custom interior. She knew the specs because she'd approved every detail. She had picked the layout not for show, but for utility. A mobile command center. A space where decisions impacting billions could be made at 40,000 feet. And yet today, she couldn't get to the stairs. A woman with no title and a loud voice had decided she didn't belong. Bethany had taken a break from the desk and was now stationed directly in front of the aircraft, clipboard in hand, standing like a bouncer at an exclusive club. Her expression hardened as Amaya approached again. "You again?" she barked. "This is a private aircraft. You're at the wrong terminal." Amaya paused, her expression unreadable. "I'm here for the flight to Teterboro." Bethany raised an eyebrow like she'd just heard someone say they were boarding a spaceship to Mars. "This isn't a commercial flight," she said, arms folding. "You can't just walk up to planes like this." "I have a boarding pass," Amaya said evenly, reaching into her coat pocket. Bethany didn't even make an effort to take it. "You really expect me to believe someone like you is chartering this jet?" "I'm not chartering it," Amaya corrected. "It's my aircraft." That did it. Bethany laughed. A full laugh, loud and mocking and just the right amount of cruel. "Right," she said between chuckles. "And I'm Beyoncé." The few ground crew members nearby glanced up from their checklists, catching the tail end of the exchange. One of them, Marcus, the ramp supervisor, froze. Amaya turned to him briefly. "Would you like to check the manifest?" He hesitated. Bethany didn't. "Don't waste your time, Marcus," she snapped. "I know this game. Fake boarding passes, entitled behavior. You're not even dressed for this level of travel." Amaya looked down at herself. Slate gray wool coat, tailored slacks, black turtleneck, clean flats, minimalist, elegant, purposeful, no designer logos, no flashy jewelry. Bethany took that as proof of inferiority. Amaya took it as a strategy. "Where are your credentials?" Bethany pressed, still riding her high. "Private aviation has standards, ma'am. This aircraft costs $75,000 per flight. That's not something people like you just swipe a card for." People like you. 3 words, spoken like a fact, not an insult, like a line carved into stone. They echoed louder than any slur. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. A younger crew member, Jennifer, bit her lip but said nothing. The wind howled. Amaya said nothing. Bethany leaned in slightly, mistaking silence for submission. "You need to back away from this aircraft. You're making staff uncomfortable." "I am the staff," Amaya said softly. Bethany blinked. "What?" "I designed the terminal. I approved the staff contracts. I own the tech that routes this aircraft, and I built the system you're standing on." Bethany stared for a beat, then snorted. "You're delusional," she said. "You probably read about the Carter family or something and decided to play pretend." Amaya didn't flinch. Not when Bethany rolled her eyes. Not when David, the terminal supervisor, walked over with an expression already dripping in bias. "What's going on here?" he asked Bethany. "She's trying to force her way onto the G700, Bethany said, gesturing toward Amaya, claiming it's hers. David turned to Amaya with a rehearsed look of concern, the kind reserved for customers who don't get how this works. "Ma'am, this is a secure area. You've already been told." "She's holding a boarding pass," Marcus interrupted, surprising even himself. David frowned. "Marcus, this doesn't concern you." "It does if she's on the manifest." "She's not," Bethany snapped. "Did you check?" Marcus asked. Bethany opened her mouth to respond, but Amaya beat her to it. "You're looking for Amaya Lennox," she said. "But on SkyeGrid manifests, it's listed under A. Lennox, FAA protocol." David and Bethany stared. Jennifer quietly pulled out her tablet and opened the passenger list. Her finger scrolled, then stopped. She looked up at Amaya, then back down. Up again. The color drained from her face. She handed the tablet to Marcus. There, at the top of the list, A. Lennox. FAA Protocol Access. Confidential status. Owner. Final approver. Marcus looked up slowly. David stepped closer and snatched the tablet. He went pale. Bethany took one look and stepped back as if the screen had burned her. But it was too late. They had already said everything. Done everything. In front of witnesses, and worse, under surveillance. Jennifer quietly pointed at the nearest CCTV camera. "The last 45 minutes are all recorded." David's voice cracked as he tried to recover. "Ms. Lennox, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Amaya's voice was cool. The only misunderstanding is that you thought I needed your permission to exist in this space. Bethany tried one last time. You could have just said who you were. Amaya's eyes locked onto hers. And you could have treated me with basic human decency without needing to know. The wind shrieked outside, as if the sky itself had something to say. Bethany, who had spent the last half hour acting like the queen of the terminal, now looked like she wanted to disappear. David fumbled. Ms. Lennox, we didn't realize. You didn't ask. Marcus stepped forward. Ma'am, what should we do? Amaya finally took out her phone. Stand by for interlock hold. Confirm activation. And then she smiled. Not with joy, not even with relief. It was the kind of smile that said, I gave you time. I gave you a chance. Now I'm done. The silence that followed was thunderous. It wasn't the kind of silence that made people feel safe. It was the kind that let everyone know the ground had just shifted. David, the terminal supervisor, was staring at the manifest like it might rewrite itself if he blinked hard enough. Bethany had taken 3 steps back, trying to act invisible, and Jennifer, the junior staffer who had confirmed Amaya's name, looked like she just reported a UFO sighting. Amaya, meanwhile, said nothing. She didn't need to. The jet behind her hummed quietly. The rain tapped its approval against the windows. Somewhere, inside that terminal and inside those people, panic was blooming. Ms. Lennox, David said finally, his voice all forced calm now. Perhaps we could step inside and discuss. You had your chance, Amaya replied flatly. He flinched. Bethany opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Look, I didn't know who you were. That's exactly the problem, Amaya said. Her voice was still quiet, but it carried like a blade through fog. Marcus, the operations supervisor, who'd remained mostly quiet until now, cleared his throat. Ma'am, he said carefully, do you want us to start pre-boarding? Jennifer glanced at him, surprised. Amaya looked over her shoulder at the jet, then back at him. No, she said, not yet. She pulled out her phone and tapped into her private channel. The signal connected instantly, direct to SkyeGrid's Interlink Authority hub. This is Lennox, she said. Activate interlock hold protocol. All Skylux-affiliated routing, suspend immediately. A pause. Then the voice on the other end responded, Confirmed, Ms. Lennox. Live hold initiated. You're now in control. Somewhere, within milliseconds, radars at 23 airports began blinking. Flight control software flagged anomalies. Routes flagged red. Tarmacs held jets in place. Gates froze in transition. The skies had just gone quiet, and Amaya Lennox was the reason why. David looked confused. Wait, what did you just do? Bethany turned pale. What's going on? Jennifer looked out the window toward the other gates. A plane that had been taxiing moments ago had stopped abruptly. Another aircraft was just sitting there, idle, with stairs extended but no movement. Then came the calls. 1, 2, 10. Phones rang up and down the terminal. Staff answered. Faces changed. Expressions stiffened. We just lost routing, someone whispered. Terminal 4's grounded. What? Same at Gate 6. Nothing's clearing. They said interlink suspended. What does that mean? Amaya stepped forward, her posture impossibly still. You told me I didn't belong here, she said, her voice almost conversational. You questioned my ID, my credibility, my intelligence, and my intentions. You laughed at me. You spoke to me like I was a child pretending to be an adult. She looked directly at Bethany. You made a choice. Bethany opened her mouth again, but Amaya raised a hand. You made it loud, public, repeated. And then she turned to David. You stood by, even when Marcus tried to help, even when Haley knew something was off. You saw it, and you stayed silent. David's mouth opened to protest, but no sound came. Now, Amaya continued, you get to experience the results of those choices. Bethany took a half step forward. Okay, we get it. You're someone important. We made a mistake, but I'm not someone important, Amaya cut her off. I'm the reason this airport has a digital nervous system. I'm the one who built the sky you fly through, and right now, I own your access to it. It wasn't bragging. It wasn't even loud. It was fact. The kind of fact that doesn't need to raise its voice because it has weight behind it. The kind of fact that sounds like a god in a tailored coat. Even Marcus, who had worked every level of operations in 3 major hubs, felt it. That moment when someone shifts from person to power, and you realize they were holding the whole board the entire time, while you were just moving pieces. Jennifer whispered to herself, "She's not just the owner, she's the system." Inside the control tower, more alerts popped up. SkyeGrid error, route suspended. Federal protocol lock engaged. FAA priority override pending. Meanwhile, Amaya looked toward Marcus. Please retrieve all surveillance footage from the past 45 minutes. I want a clean chain of custody. Deliver it directly to SkyeGrid Legal and the FAA Ethics Board. Marcus nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Jennifer, standing just behind him, found her voice. Is there anything I can do? Amaya turned toward her, and, for the first time, her expression softened slightly. You already did, she said. Bethany looked around in disbelief. You can't do this. You can't just shut down flights because of a misunderstanding. Amaya stared at her for a long second, and then she smiled. I didn't shut down the flights because of a misunderstanding, she said. I shut them down because of a pattern. Bethany blinked. I've been monitoring Skylux Airlines incident data for months. Passenger complaints, profiling patterns, HR silence. You're not a one-off. You're a symptom. She took a breath. And today, the system finally said enough. David stepped forward, desperate. Ms. Lennox, Amaya. Look, please. We're just employees. We were doing our job. No, Amaya said. You were doing what you thought your job was, which was gatekeeping. And now, he asked, voice cracking. Now your job is over. More phones buzzed. FAA dispatch had entered the terminal. They weren't panicked. They were methodical. Briefcases, badges, and authority. One of the agents stepped up to Amaya. We've received confirmation of your interlock engagement. Would you like a legal observer assigned to this investigation? Yes, Amaya replied. Also bring in a diversity compliance officer. We'll need documentation. Bethany sat down hard on a luggage cart. Jennifer stood straighter. Marcus looked like he just survived a near-death experience. And David? David just lowered his head. Amaya stepped away from the group, her phone still in hand. She tapped into a second secure channel, to her brother, Amaya Lennox, head of SkyeGrid Legal. Isaiah, she said, voice steady. Assemble the Ethics Review Board. Full investigation. Launch notification to FAA oversight. Pull all internal logs from Dallas-Fort Worth Terminal 7. He didn't ask why. He knew that tone. And he knew his sister didn't move like this unless something big had broken. As Amaya ended the call, she looked once more at the glass doors that had closed in her face just an hour earlier. They hadn't just blocked her from a flight. They had revealed an entire rotting system underneath the marble and glass. And now, she wasn't just walking through. She was walking through with the authority of someone who builds worlds, then burns them down when they fail people. The rain kept falling, but it no longer touched her. She was already above the storm. The FAA agents weren't just there to observe. They came with papers, protocols, and purpose. Within minutes, the terminal was no longer run by Skylux Airlines. It was under federal observation. David, the man who had laughed nervously just 20 minutes ago, was now escorted to a private security room. Bethany, still in shock, clutched her name badge like it might protect her. Meanwhile, Jennifer quietly took off her Skylux pin and tucked it in her purse. She knew. This wasn't just a disciplinary action. This was about to blow up the whole house. Inside the FAA's temporary review office, set up in a glass-walled conference room, Amaya sat across from two investigators. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. Agent Callahan, mid-40s, clear-eyed and sharp, clicked his pen. Ms. Lennox, can you confirm the precise timestamp of your interlock protocol engagement? 14:12:39 Eastern, Amaya replied. Logged through SkyeGrid Core 7. He nodded, impressed. And you initiated the hold personally? Yes, under emergency ethics clause. Title IX discrimination trigger, secondary to repeated profiling and denial of service. The second agent, a woman named Reed, looked up. You're saying this wasn't an isolated incident? Amaya leaned forward. I'm saying this was a pattern, and that pattern is documented. I have over 64 flagged interactions between Skylux personnel and high-tier black or non-white passengers in the past 90 days. Most at international hubs. Most involving similar staff. She pushed a folder across the table. Inside, screenshots, transcripts, audio logs, complaint IDs. Each one a needle. Together, a dagger. Across the room, Marcus paced quietly outside the glass. He kept checking his phone, watching the time. He knew corporate would call him soon. They'd want to know who said what, who stayed silent, who backed the wrong side. And this time, he wasn't going to cover for anyone. Meanwhile, Bethany was still trying to recover her balance. She had just called her union rep and tried, unsuccessfully, to spin the story. She ambushed me, Bethany said into the phone. It was a setup. I mean, how was I supposed to know she was the CEO of some secret government tech or whatever? The rep didn't answer right away. Then finally, Bethany, have you read the news? Bethany frowned. What? SkyeGrid just published a statement. The system logs, the activation files. They posted everything. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean everything? They even published the passenger manifest, and your name's on the report. You're trending, Bethany, and not in a good way. Indeed, on the ground outside, reporters had begun showing up. Somehow, God knows how, a leak had happened. Maybe it was the tweet from an off-duty gate worker. Maybe it was the video from Jennifer, quietly uploaded to her cousin who ran a blog. Maybe it was divine timing, or just karma, on schedule. But it was there now. Front page. CEO Amaya Lennox humiliated by Skylux staff. Grounds flights with one command. Flightgate. Private jet CEO silenced, then fires back with federal power. She built the system. Now she's tearing it down. Amaya remained calm. She always did. She didn't even flinch when her publicist called her. You're everywhere, the voice said. I know. You want me to issue a statement? No, let it ride. Let the footage speak. Inside Terminal 7, the energy had changed. Passengers who had been delayed were now whispering among themselves. One woman recognized Amaya from a Forbes cover. Another said she'd once seen her speak at a tech summit. A young girl stared in awe, gripping her mom's hand. That's her, Mom. That's the lady who stopped the planes. Jennifer was pulled into an informal debrief by the ethics officer. And when did you first realize something was wrong? They asked. Jennifer hesitated. When Ms. Lennox didn't argue. I'm sorry? She didn't try to force anything. She just waited, calm, like, she paused, like she'd done this before. The officer nodded. That usually means they've survived worse. Jennifer looked down. I should have said something sooner. The officer's tone stayed even. Well, you're speaking now. That's what counts. Meanwhile, in a private lounge, Amaya was on a call with her inner team. Start drafting the official compliance package, she said. Name it the Flight Dignity Protocol. We'll require all airlines who use SkyeGrid to adopt it within 60 days. And if they don't? Isaiah asked on the other end. They lose access. There was a long pause. Then Isaiah said, just like that? Amaya exhaled slowly. No, not just like that. Just like me. Back in the terminal, an emergency meeting was called. The entire Skylux executive crew was flying in, some from Atlanta, some from Denver, some still stuck on grounded jets they couldn't even reroute. And those who arrived were met by FAA escorts. David was the first to be let go. Bethany was suspended on the spot. 3 other staff were asked to step aside pending formal hearings. Marcus was asked if he'd consider an ethics liaison role. Jennifer was offered a promotion. And Amaya? Amaya walked out of Terminal 7 not as a passenger denied access, but as the woman who redefined what access meant. At the exit, she paused. Outside, the press had swarmed. Microphones, cameras, bright lights, dozens of voices yelling her name. But she didn't speak to them. Instead, she looked toward a young black boy in the crowd, maybe 10 years old. He held a toy airplane and a hand-lettered sign that read, "Build it better." She smiled, walked over, and knelt. "You like planes?" she asked. He nodded fast. "One day I want to fly them." "Don't just fly them," she said. "Build the systems that make them fly." She stood up, faced the crowd, didn't say a word. Because sometimes you don't need to speak to be heard. You just need to act like the storm and remind people that even the sky follows rules now. Rules you wrote. The Skylux CEO finally arrived. Private jet, black Escalade, full security escort. His name was Grayson Keller, a man infamous in the aviation world for 2 things: his obsession with optics and his utter lack of empathy. The kind of man who smiled in press photos but never made eye contact with a single janitor in his buildings. And today, he was about to meet someone he couldn't spin his way around. As his convoy pulled into the tarmac, FAA agents briefly delayed him, just enough to remind him he wasn't running the show. Inside Terminal 7, Amaya was already seated, back straight, calm, alone. She didn't bring a lawyer, didn't need to. Because when you own the system, you don't beg for meetings. Meetings happen because of you. Grayson stormed in like he still had leverage. "Ms. Lennox," he said, forcing a grin. "Quite the situation we've landed in." Amaya looked up, her tone neutral. "Did you fly commercial?" He blinked. "What? You came in on a Skylux jet, didn't you? Interesting choice, given the circumstances." He cleared his throat. "Listen, let's get ahead of this thing. A few bad apples, sure, but we've invested heavily in compliance. We just need time to realign." "Time," Amaya repeated softly. "Yes, time and perhaps a cooperative statement, a joint press release. Say we've agreed to new ethics training, commit to quarterly reviews. I'm sure you know how the press eats that up." She studied him, then asked one question. "Are you offering performance or penance?" Grayson shifted. "Excuse me? Are you here to put on a show, Mr. Keller? Or are you here to dismantle a system that allowed one of your employees to look a black woman in the eye and say, 'You don't belong here'?" He paused. No clever answer came, just silence. Amaya slid a folder across the table. Inside, a proposal. Not for training, not for PR, but for structural surrender. SkyeGrid would assume operational audit control over all Skylux terminals. SkyeGrid would implement live bias flagging at every touchpoint. And in return, Skylux wouldn't be publicly blacklisted. Yet. It wasn't a punishment, it was a test. And Grayson knew it. His hands trembled as he flipped the pages. "This is complete oversight." Amaya didn't flinch. "That's correct. You want to own us." "I already do," she replied. "You just haven't felt it, until now." Outside the room, news of the meeting had already leaked. Hashtags were trending. #grounded by Grace, #she built it, #you don't belong here. And then, suddenly, SkyeGrid made their move. They didn't wait for Grayson's answer. At 3:12 p.m., a public statement was posted. Effective immediately, SkyeGrid Technologies is initiating an emergency acquisition review of Skylux's digital infrastructure contracts due to repeated ethical violations. The industry gasped. Because that wasn't just a statement, that was a trigger. Within 7 minutes, 3 things happened. Skybank froze all ESG-aligned credit extensions tied to Skylux. AirSure Insurance downgraded Skylux's fleet coverage from platinum to hold. And most importantly, 3 of Skylux's international hub partnerships suspended shared access, citing compliance uncertainty. Back in the meeting room, Grayson's phone buzzed. Again and again. His face turned pale. "You leaked it." Amaya didn't blink. "I informed the stakeholders. That's my duty." He slammed the folder shut. "This is war." Amaya stood up, towering, not in height, but in presence. "This isn't war, Grayson. This is gravity. The system you floated on had no ethics. I'm just reintroducing weight." In that moment, something broke inside him. Not pride. He had none. But illusion. The illusion that people like Amaya were optional, replaceable, delayable. He finally realized the truth. She wasn't a guest in his world. He had been trespassing in hers. Later that evening, a press conference was called, but not by Skylux, by SkyeGrid. Amaya stood before the podium, lights flashing, a sea of microphones in front of her. But she didn't smile, didn't gesture. She simply opened a folder and began reading. "Today, we begin the rollout of the Passenger Equity Accord, a mandatory charter for any airline operating under U.S. federal signal routing systems. Non-compliance will result in operational suspension under the FAA's Interlink framework." Reporters scribbled. Phones buzzed. One hand shot up. "Ms. Lennox, is this about justice or control?" Amaya answered without pause. "This is about the right to exist with dignity, 35,000 feet in the air and right here on the ground." As she left the podium, one reporter whispered to another, "She doesn't speak like a CEO." "No," the other replied. "She speaks like a god." Outside, Marcus and Jennifer watched the live feed from the break room. Jennifer wiped her eyes. "Did you ever think it'd be her?" Marcus shook his head. "She was never trying to prove anything," he said. "She was just waiting for the day she didn't have to stay quiet." Jennifer leaned back. "And that day's here." Amaya didn't go home that night. She flew straight to New York, landing just before midnight. Her son met her at the terminal, arms wide, still in his graduation gown. He didn't ask about the scandal, didn't mention the news. He just whispered, "You looked like a storm out there." Amaya hugged him tight. "No," she replied, smiling softly. "I looked like myself, finally." By noon the next day, the skyline above DC felt different. There were still flights in the air. Planes still moved. But every CEO in the aviation industry knew they were flying on borrowed time. Because Amaya Lennox had just dropped a new standard, the Passenger Equity Accord. And now, every airline had 2 options: sign it or fall. At 11:47 a.m., the first private jet landed at Reagan National. CEO of Cross Blue Airlines, Stanley Ward, stepped out with a look that blended desperation and forced diplomacy. Right behind him, Alina Giroux of Eurosky Connect. Then Julian Perez of Aeronex. One by one they came. Some arrived angry, some nervous. One showed up with his legal team, trying to mask fear with footnotes, but none of them came to negotiate. They came to survive. At the SkyeGrid headquarters just outside DC, Amaya sat in a wide glass room with nothing behind her but sunlight and satellites. She wore gray, calm, storm-colored. A thin line of folders sat on the table, each with an airline's name embossed in silver. And just beneath them, a signature page. One clause, bolded at the top. "I hereby commit my airline to the Passenger Equity Accord under the jurisdiction of SkyeGrid Technologies, the FAA, and the Office of Aviation Civil Rights." There was no fine print, no bargaining, just truth or turbulence. Stanley Ward was the first to enter. "Ms. Lennox," he began, already sweating, "we want to commend you on your leadership. These past few days have been, well, revealing. And as a company that values diversity, we—" "Save the monologue," Amaya said, not unkindly. "You're here for the same reason everyone else is. Your access codes are due to expire in 72 hours. Sign, and they don't." He glanced at the pen beside the folder. "It's just this language. Oversight? Ethics audits?" Amaya looked him square in the eyes. "Passengers have background checks. Crews do. Security does. Why should ethics be the only thing in aviation that flies without clearance?" He said nothing, then signed. One down. The others followed, some with more grace, some with more ego. But the outcome was the same. They signed, one after another. Each hand reluctantly delivered control to a woman who had once been told to wait outside. And now, they waited on her. By 3:00 p.m., only one chair remained empty. Crest Point Air, the airline with the highest bias complaints in the last 5 years, still hadn't shown up. Amaya didn't chase them. She just looked to her assistant. "Rescind their clearance tokens at midnight," she said. "But they'll lose 38 routes. They've already lost the point." Back outside, the media swarmed. But this time, no questions were shouted. Because everyone already knew the headline. 12 airlines sign passenger equity accord. SkyeGrid declares ethics era begins now. At home that evening, Amaya sat on her porch, legs crossed, barefoot, cup of tea in hand. Her son sat across from her, laptop open, reading news out loud. "Mom," he said, "someone called you the Chua of the skies." She raised an eyebrow. "That's a bit much," he grinned. "It's trending," she laughed. "Let them trend, but they better spell it right." He read another line. "They say you built a code of ethics stronger than any boarding pass." Amaya smiled into her tea. "That's the goal, baby. Not just to board planes, but to belong on them." Later that night, she stood alone by the window, lights of DC blinking like constellations. For a moment, she thought of the flight attendant, Bethany. She didn't hate her. Never did. Because this was never about one person. It was about the system that whispered to women like Bethany, "You get to decide who belongs." Well, not anymore. Amaya whispered into the silence. "You built gates to keep us out. I built a grid that can't be locked, and somewhere in that grid, in the pulse of satellites and signals and code, was her mother's voice. The one that once said, 'If they don't open the door, baby girl, then you be the Chua that builds the next terminal.'" 3 days after the passenger equity accord made headlines, something shifted. Not in the air, but online. It started with a video clip, badly cropped, heavily edited, grainy. A woman, Amaya, arguing with a flight crew at a check-in counter. Her voice was calm, but the clip was cut to make her look aggressive. Then came the caption, "This is the woman controlling your airports? Arrogant, disrespectful, dangerous." No context, no date, no location. But within hours, the smear campaign exploded. They came for her on podcasts, talk shows, message boards with usernames like FlyRight22 and Aviation for Truth. They painted her as power-hungry, as someone who snuck her way into influence. Some questioned her credentials, others attacked her looks, and some didn't even try to hide it. Typical angry black woman, put her in her place. The hashtags followed. At Grid Overreach, at Who's Amaya, had Take Back. Back our skies. It wasn't spontaneous, it was engineered. At 6:04 p.m. that night, Amaya sat in her office, watching the narrative twist in real time. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. But her assistant Jennifer looked like she was about to combust. "Ma'am, this is coordinated. They're hitting every platform. Bots, fake news, AI-spun articles. Someone's paying for this. Amaya nodded, calm. They're trying to destabilize the Accord, she said. Not me, Jennifer paced. But it's you on every headline. You're the story now, not the system. Amaya turned to her screen. On it, a headline from Sky Nation Daily. Leaked FAA documents suggest SkyeGrid may have violated ethics during takeover. Beneath it, a quote from Crest Point Air CEO, Victor Harlan. And just like that, she knew. Victor Harlan, the only CEO who refused to sign the Accord. The only one still holding roots through loopholes overseas. He'd tried to stall her with fake negotiations. Now he was going for the throat. But what Victor didn't know, Amaya had been expecting him. 2 months earlier, she'd quietly launched Opal Sentinel, a shadow monitoring system tracking manipulation of FAA compliance data. Not to spy, to document. And Victor's name popped up 34 times, altering crew compliance scores, masking discrimination complaints, even running a quiet fund for PR weaponization. At 7:16 p.m., Amaya made one call to a woman named Senator Althea Boyd, a longtime ally, a former federal prosecutor, and someone who did not tolerate men like Victor Harlan. Althea, Amaya said, voice steady. It's time. Everything ready? Everything. Want him blocked or buried? Amaya didn't even pause. Both. By 9:03 p.m., the Senate Oversight Committee received an emergency dossier from SkyeGrid Ethics Division. By 10:12 p.m., the FAA was in closed session, and by midnight, the dominoes began falling. First, Crest Point's FAA clearance was suspended pending investigation. Second, 3 international airports revoked Victor's exclusive contracts. Third, the Department of Justice confirmed it was opening a probe into Crest Point's discriminatory practices and falsified audit data. But it wasn't over, because Amaya didn't just defend herself. She exposed the entire network behind the smear. Anonymous shell groups, PACEs, lobby firms. She named them and tagged their funding trails to aviation industry insiders. The press had a field day. By 7:42 a.m. the next morning, the real headlines hit. Amaya Lennox unmasks industry blackmail scheme. Crest Point CEO implicated in data corruption scandal. She didn't blink. SkyeGrid CEO turned smear campaign into federal investigation. From who is she to she runs this, Amaya Lennox becomes ethics icon of the skies. Victor Harlan resigned that afternoon, not with a press conference, not with dignity. He was escorted out of Crest Point HQ by federal agents in plain clothes. His final statement to the board? I didn't know she had that kind of reach. Back at SkyeGrid, Jennifer burst into Amaya's office with a grin. Crest Point stock just dropped 29%, she said. They're calling it the Lennox correction. Amaya smirked. Economics speaks louder than ethics sometimes. But not when you're both, Jennifer said. That evening, a new hashtag began trending. #Let her fly photos of Amaya. Quotes from her speeches. Fan art. Merch. Even her high school photo made its way onto Twitter with the caption, "She was always gonna build a higher runway." Amaya's son sent her a message. "Mom, you didn't just win, you rewrote the game." She replied, "No, baby, I just took back the skies." 1 week after Crest Point collapsed, Amaya Lennox's calendar was filled with invitations. Some were expected. Senate panels, industry awards, ethics symposiums. Some were absurd. Daytime talk shows, magazine cover shoots, a reality show offer from a network she refused to name aloud. And then there was this meeting. Private, unscheduled, requested through back channels. Sender, Valin Holdings International. The name meant little to most people, but Amaya knew better. They weren't just another fund. They were the invisible hand behind over 40% of the world's flight tech infrastructure. A shadow empire that moved in silence but held sway over everything from airport facial recognition systems to military-grade logistics software. They didn't knock unless they wanted control. The meeting was set at a private suite in DC's Van Lee Tower, floor 64. No media access, no press. The elevator ride was slow, but Amaya used every second. She wasn't nervous, but she was watching. The moment she walked into the room, she understood the play. 3 men, 1 woman, all dressed like money could be printed at will. The lead, a man with Scandinavian features and a voice like warm glass, smiled. "Ms. Lennox," he said, "we're not here to waste your time." She gave nothing back, just sat. He slid a folder across the table. In it, a proposal. "A global expansion of SkyeGrid," he explained. 43 new markets, 12 new nations, 3-year projection, $7.8 billion. Amaya didn't blink. "We'd handle the regulatory burden," he added. "International routing, strategic deployment." "And in return?" she asked. His smile tightened. "We'd become SkyeGrid's strategic ethics partner, embedded access, co-authorship on policy." Amaya's hand stopped on the folder. "What you're saying," she said slowly, "is you want in." "No," he replied smoothly. "We want to help shape the skies, together." But she knew that tone. It was the same tone a certain flight attendant had once used when she said, "This lounge is for premium passengers only." Only this time, the exclusion came wrapped in elegance and billions, and behind it, a clear threat. "Let us in, or be left out." Amaya stood. "No," she said plainly. The woman in the group blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're excused," Amaya replied, already walking toward the door. "SkyeGrid doesn't need more shadows pretending to be light." The Scandinavian man didn't move, but his voice followed. "You know how this works, Ms. Lennox. We don't make second offers." She turned back once. "Then make sure this one counts when I send it back with a stamp that says rejected on principle." The next morning, it began. Just like Crest Point, whispers in tech media. An anonymous insider suggesting SkyeGrid's expansion model was unstable. A sudden drop in investor confidence. 2 partner airports quietly freezing on boarding. Jennifer barged into Amaya's office, eyes wide. "They're trying to squeeze us. Same tactics. They're betting you'll fold under pressure." Amaya opened a new file on her desktop. Operation Lighthold. It wasn't a defense protocol. It was a blueprint for independence. Over the next 48 hours, Amaya made 3 moves. 1. She launched OpenFly, a public-facing ethics dashboard allowing flyers to see how every airline scored under the Passenger Equity Accord, in real time. Transparency became her weapon. 2. She activated the Shield Pact, a pre-negotiated agreement with 6 major airports and 2 government allies that guaranteed priority access if SkyeGrid was attacked economically. Valen couldn't pull the plug because Amaya already rewired the circuit. 3. She called a live press conference. No scripts, no filters. "The skies are not for sale," she said calmly, eyes locked on the cameras. "And neither is my integrity. If you're wondering whether I'm afraid, I am. Not of losing money, not of being outnumbered. I'm afraid we'll forget why I started this. I was told to wait outside, so I built the door, the room, and the policy that locks the door behind men like the ones trying to buy their way in now. You don't get to own ethics. Not anymore." The broadcast went viral in 38 countries. Within 12 hours, OpenFly's servers were flooded. Passengers started sharing their airline scores like Yelp reviews. Booked with Clear Skies, they scored an 87. Avoiding Jet Nimbus just got flagged by the Ethics Index. Valen's shadow play fell apart in the light. 2 days later, Amaya got a letter. No signatures, no names. Just 4 words printed in elegant font. "You were never invited." She smiled as she tore it up. "You're right," she whispered. "I didn't wait for your invitation. I wrote the guest list." 3 weeks after the press conference, the game had changed. Not just for Amaya Lennox, but for everyone who had ever boarded a plane thinking silence would protect them. Airlines scrambled to meet OpenFly's demand for transparency. Passengers were choosing flights based not on price or perks, but ethics scores. The balance of power had shifted. And yet, behind closed doors, resistance was brewing. Valin Holdings didn't disappear. They pivoted, quietly purchasing majority shares in 3 mid-tier airlines. And one morning, without warning, these airlines opted out of the passenger equity accord, claiming operational sovereignty. The move created a loophole. They could still operate in most international airports while dodging ethical compliance. Amaya saw it for what it was, a stress test. They wanted to know how far she would go. She didn't answer with words. She answered with code and a keystroke. Operation Interlock. It was a final protocol embedded deep in SkyeGrid's routing core, designed only for one purpose: to freeze unethical airlines out of the system entirely. At 9:45 a.m., she activated it. 72 airports received an alert. Airline ethics score. Non-compliant. Routing clearance suspended. Within hours, 83 flights grounded. 1.2 B in contracts frozen. Passengers rerouted through ethical carriers only. It was the largest single-day disruption since 9/11, and every headline knew it. Valin panicked. They thought she'd flinch. They thought the chaos would shame her. But Amaya stood tall on national television that evening. I warned you. This isn't just about business. This is about who we become when no one is looking. If airlines want access to our skies, they'll play by the rules. And if they don't fly. Not on my watch. Some people say I act like a god, but when the system was broken, someone had to take the wheel. The word God echoed across social media, but not with mockery, with reverence. Passengers began calling her the Sky Guard. Mothers told their daughters, that's what leadership looks like. Former whistleblowers sent her emails with subject lines like, thank you for letting me breathe again. One letter read, I was taped to a seat at 9 years old. Today, I watched the airline that did it to me get grounded. You don't know me, but you saved me. Even Valin couldn't ignore the shift. On the 12th day, they requested a summit. Not in secret, public, recorded, transparent. The world tuned in. Amaya walked into the summit alone. No entourage, no legal team, just presence. Across the table sat the same man from the Van Lee Tower suite, but this time, he didn't smile. Ms. Lennox, he said, we concede. We want to return to the skies. She nodded once. On one condition. He waited. She placed a binder on the table. This is the Global Passenger Integrity Charter, she said. Every airline operating under your funding signs it. Every one of your tech subsidiaries builds it into their platforms. You don't just adopt it, you enforce it. You want skies? Then you follow skies ruled by dignity, not dollars. They tried to bargain, reduce clauses, delay implementation. She stood, calm but final. You don't get to edit the future. You get to join it, or be left behind. One by one, the signatures came. Airlines, holding groups, international regulators, even rival tech firms, and finally, Valin Holdings. The man signed, jaw tight. As cameras clicked, Amaya turned to the audience. This isn't my victory. This is our reminder that silence does not protect, that compliance is not ethics, that a system ruled by convenience is a system that will fail, and that the skies, like justice, only belong to those who rise with honor. The FAA adopted the charter as a global standard. SkyeGrid became not just a platform, but a symbol. And Amaya? She stepped back from the spotlight. No press tour, no book deal. She declined magazine interviews, turned down a $10 million docuseries, and quietly returned to her Dallas office, because to her, this was never about fame. One evening, as the sun set over DFW International, Jennifer looked up from her screen. "They're calling it the Lennox Accord," she said, voice soft. Amaya, sipping tea, just smiled. "No," she said. "Call it what it is. It's what happens when someone refuses to wait outside." The banner hung above Gate B12 at Atlanta International read, "First Annual Passenger Ethics Awards Ceremony." But most people just called it the Lennox Ceremony. Not because Amaya named it. She hadn't. In fact, she hadn't even planned to attend. But she showed up anyway, not to be seen, but to see. And what she saw was a boy, maybe 12 or 13, in a wrinkled dress shirt, scuffed shoes, and the kind of posture that said he wasn't used to spotlights. His name was Jalen Monroe, and this wasn't supposed to be his story. 2 months earlier, Jalen had been on a domestic flight from Charlotte to Denver. His mother had saved for that trip all year. It was her first vacation in over a decade. They were flying coach. But due to an overbooking mishap, the gate agent upgraded them to first class. They thought it was luck. It turned out to be a trap. Halfway through boarding, a flight attendant approached and loudly asked Jalen's mother to return to the back, claiming there'd been a mistake. Jalen spoke up. "We're allowed to be here. We have the boarding passes." The attendant smiled tightly. "Not today, sweetheart." Jalen didn't yell. He didn't cry. He simply reached into his backpack, pulled out his tablet, and opened the OpenFly dashboard. He showed her the airline's ethics score, which had dropped below 80 the week before. He tapped into the passenger protection clause under the Lennox Accord, and he quietly said, "If you force us to move, you'll trigger a Category 2 ethics flag. That's a mandatory review under the FAA." The flight attendant froze. The gate agent was called. They huddled, whispered, checked tablets, made phone calls. Jalen and his mom stayed seated. And 20 minutes later, the attendant apologized, publicly. They flew first class, with no more interruptions. The story went viral only because another passenger, an off-duty teacher, posted about it online. A 12-year-old boy just shut down a discriminatory policy with more grace and clarity than most grown men I've seen. I don't know who he is, but today I saw the Lennox Accord work in real time. The post hit 2 million likes in a week. Amaya didn't comment, but she took note. Now, Jalen stood awkwardly on stage, holding a small plaque that read, "Passenger Integrity Champion, Jalen Monroe." He looked down at the audience, then back at the MC. "I didn't do anything big," he mumbled into the mic. "I just used the tool." Someone shouted gently from the crowd. "You used your voice, baby. That's the big thing." Laughter, applause, a few quiet tears. Afterward, Amaya approached quietly. No press, no introductions. Jalen turned and stared. His mother blinked, speechless. Amaya knelt to his level. "I heard what you did," she said, "and I want you to know something." Jalen nodded slowly. "The tool exists because I once stood at a gate like you did, and someone told me I didn't belong. But you didn't just belong. You showed them what belonging looks like." She reached into her bag and handed him something small, a silver pin, the SkyeGrid logo, with his name engraved underneath. "Jalen Monroe, Honor Passenger 1. Jalen held it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. As she stood to leave, his voice stopped her. "Miss Lennox?" She turned. "Do you think I could ever build something like you did?" She smiled. "I don't think, Jalen. I know." And just like that, a new chapter began. Not with a scandal, not with a lawsuit, but with a child. And a pin. Amaya Lennox stood by the window of her Dallas office, watching the horizon bleed from burnt orange to deep velvet. Planes took off every 6 minutes, gliding into the dusk like promises kept. On her desk sat the final document, a single-page transfer authorization. Below the SkyeGrid insignia was the name of its new CEO, Jennifer Rames. Jennifer was ready. Amaya knew it. She had watched the woman grow from a quietly brilliant operations analyst into the moral backbone of the entire platform. And now, Jennifer would take the reins not just of SkyeGrid's infrastructure, but its integrity. Amaya hadn't told the board yet. That would come tomorrow. Tonight, she just needed to let go. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Jennifer stepped in, holding a steaming mug. "Chamomile," she said, placing it beside the document. "You haven't eaten since noon." Amaya raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you monitor my meals?" Jennifer shrugged. "Since you forgot lunch 3 days in a row." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind between women who've gone to war together and made it back. Scarred, but whole. Then Jennifer's eyes drifted to the document. "Is this final?" Amaya nodded. "It's time. You're ready." Jennifer looked down, but her voice didn't waver. "We're only here because you didn't wait outside." They stood in silence for a long beat. Then Amaya said, "You'll need to move the core Sky Pulse node to the Geneva servers. The North American load is too volatile, and don't let Valen back in. Not even if they beg." Jennifer smiled. "Already flagged them." Another pause. "Will you stay on the board?" Amaya shook her head. "No, I won't even stay on the platform." Jennifer blinked. "You're deleting your access?" "Every trace," Amaya said. "I was never supposed to be the story." 2 days later, the press gathered at the Lennox Foundation auditorium. The backdrop read, "SkyeGrid 2.0, the ethics horizon." Jennifer stepped onto the stage, sharp in a navy suit, her voice firm. "Today, we enter a new chapter, one where transparency isn't a feature, it's a foundation, one where passengers are protected, not processed, and one where power answers to principle, every time. This is the world Amaya Lennox fought to build, and from this day forward, we carry it, in policy, in code, and in conscience." Backstage, Amaya listened, hidden in the wings. No cameras, no applause, no spotlight, just silence. And that, to her, was peace. Later that week, she flew commercial, for the first time in years, on a tiny regional jet with no first class. She sat in the exit row, middle seat. No one recognized her. No one whispered. And for the first time in decades, she didn't mind. Somewhere over Missouri, the flight hit turbulence. The man next to her, a burly contractor in a trucker cap, gave her a nervous look. "You scared of flying?" he asked. Amaya smiled. "I used to be," she said. "But not anymore." He grunted. "Yeah? What changed?" She looked out the window, where the sun broke through gray clouds like a silent blessing. "I realized the sky doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to those who protect the quiet ones." That night, back in her apartment, Amaya opened the journal she kept since law school. She flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you set in motion." Then she closed the book and mailed it to Jalen Monroe. Inside was a note. "Your future won't look like mine, and that's the point. Be better than me. Fly higher." 3 months later, a mural appeared on the side of Terminal 3 at JFK. It showed a black woman in a cobalt blazer, standing at a closed airport lounge door. Not knocking, not begging, just waiting. And next to her, in bold silver paint, she didn't wait to be let in. She became the god of the door. No one signed the mural. No one took credit. But millions shared it online. And when passengers passed it, they didn't just stop to take selfies. They stood in silence, like entering a church, like thanking something bigger than law. Amaya never posted about it, never confirmed she'd seen it. But in her home office, above the desk she no longer used, she framed one photo, the mural, the door, and beneath it, a simple phrase she once whispered to herself when no one else would listen. Let them underestimate you. That's how you change everything. What about you? Have you ever been told to wait outside, only to realize you didn't need permission to walk through the door? Tell us where you're watching from, and what moment in your life made you stop asking for approval. Because maybe the quiet ones aren't weak. Maybe they're just waiting for the right moment to rewrite the rules.